waving the application form, but Ephraim refused, insisting it would backfire. Suddenly, Ephraim froze as Julie, her best friend, slipped into the cafe and gave her an encouraging look. A familiar voice called from behind, Deculin himself, telling Ephraim to step aside. Her face froze, and Julie's silent encouragement bolstered her confidence. Taking a deep breath, Ephraim carefully held out the application form and explained that she wanted to establish a club composed of commoners and needed his signature. From Deculin's perspective, her words caused him to hesitate. Other professors would not cooperate, so helping her seemed the best course. He reached out, took the application, and quickly signed it before handing it back, instructing her to send the details to his office. Ephraim stood frozen in shock, unable to believe he had agreed. As she watched Deculin walk away, Julie lunged at her with a tight hug, celebrating the success. Ignoring her friend's excitement, Ephraim remained focused on Deculin, puzzled by his unexpected kindness. Time passed, and the scene transitioned to Deculin's lecture hall. At that moment, Deculin's class had already begun. Today's lesson focused on understanding pure elements. He explained that elements served as the foundation of all magic, yet many magicians still failed to grasp the difference between categorized magic and pure elemental magic. Seated below, Ephraim was lost in a whirlwind of chaotic thoughts, struggling to make sense of why Deculin had suddenly shown her kindness. She speculated whether it was due to guilt or sympathy, reminding herself that he had been the one who led her father to his death. Even if he was being nice now, it felt fake. If he truly acknowledged his wrongdoing, he should reveal his true nature and show remorse. The more she dwelled on it, the tighter her hands clenched, trembling with frustration. Julie, sitting beside her, noticed and asked with concern if she was okay. She told Ephraim not to worry about the other students, who only knew how to gossip. Julie's gaze shifted towards someone nearby, leaving Ephraim puzzled about what she was referring to. Following her line of sight, Ephraim noticed several noble students staring at her with visible disdain. She let out a small, awkward chuckle, realizing she had officially made herself an enemy of the nobles after recent events. Even though she was technically a noble herself, she had grown accustomed to being looked down upon. Composing herself, she reassured Julie that it was fine and suggested they just focus on the lecture. Oblivious to the thoughts running through her head, Deculin continued with his lesson. He explained that the magic circle students had been using carried meaning in every stroke. To demonstrate, he activated his own magic, summoning a glowing circle above his palm, from which a small flame flickered to life. He explained that the color of the spell could be altered by adding 2 additional strokes to the circle, which determined the hue of the flame, leading into today's topic, fire flow. While explaining, Deculin effortlessly used his telekinetic abilities to levitate a book beside him. 2 orbs of energy began to converge in his hands, one glowing green, the other blue. Ephraim realized her assumptions had been incorrect. His lecture was not merely a display of skill. As a professor, Deculin's teaching was a masterful demonstration, using mana to explain concepts with profound depth and clarity. New students in the lecture hall were shocked, and even Sylvia, a prodigy long uninterested in study, found herself captivated. Unbothered by the curious gazes of the students, Deculin meticulously broke down each concept. He demonstrated how a magic circle could summon water, and how, when combined with artistic magic, it transformed. Performing the modification before their eyes, the circle darkened to a deep purple, and the flame it conjured no longer burned in place. It flowed and twisted like a river suspended in midair, astonishing the entire class. The fire actually moved like water. On the opposite side of the room, Sylvia was the most astonished. She had never expected his lesson to be so grounded in theory. Most so-called genius magicians relied on instinct, treating theory as a rigid secondary framework. Prioritizing theory above all else was considered inefficient. Practical magic required intuition. The paradox of magic, she realized, was that high-level magicians needed strong intuition, yet often struggled to explain it theoretically. For someone like Deculin, whose genius was constantly questioned, Dedicating an entire lesson to theory alone was almost impossible, and that made Sylvia even more curious. Time passed quickly, and the scene shifted to the dormitory of the Magic Tower. Ephraim, having just finished Deculin's lecture, was making her way back to her room. As she walked, she let out a deep sigh, reflecting on everything she had just witnessed. That was completely different from what the rumors had said. Ephraim had never been this focused in a class before. As she reflected, her gaze darkened slightly at the sight of her door, covered in countless insults scrawled across its surface. Yet rather than anger, she felt only mild annoyance. How long did they plan to keep up this childish prank? It had worsened ever since her conflict with Sylvia. Her voice trailed off mid-sentence when she noticed a paper bag stuffed into the door's mail slot. Reading what was written on it, her expression twisted in confusion. A sponsorship certificate. She almost fell for it, thinking there was no way this could be real. Who in their right mind would sponsor her when both the Illade family and Deculin despised her? Still, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. She could report it and claim her reward. Letting out a dry chuckle, she made her way to the Office of Magical Administration to verify the matter. Once confirmed by the staff, her expression went completely blank. It was real. She recalled the administrator saying, "This isn't a joke. The official seal is authentic." Ephraim couldn't hold back her reaction. Just the thought of a massive sum of money suddenly falling into her lap made her face light up with joy, like a flower blooming in spring. She even pinched her own cheek to check if she was dreaming. This should wake me up. Wake up. Then concern replaced excitement. Wait a second. No one saw me, right? What if people found out I have 100.00 M? I should pack my things just in case. I shouldn't have come to the administration office. A staff member gave her a weird look, probably eyeing the money. Oh God, I should have been more careful. Ephraim panicked, shooting up from her seat. Bang! Her head slammed into the desk, sending waves of pain through her small frame. Clutching her head, she trembled, her body racked with agony. For a moment, she sat frozen. Then an overwhelming emotion spread through her chest. Her eyes welled up with tears. I'm still not dreaming. Someone actually recognized my talent. There are still good people in this world. Just a little more. I just need to push myself a little more, she whispered, trying to hold back sobs threatening to spill over. Meanwhile, in a different location, Uriel received unpleasant news from her butler. In disbelief, she asked if it was true. Standing in front of her, the butler nodded. Yes, my lady. He has gone to Shatzel's auction. He should have arrived by now. Uriel clutched her head in frustration. He had lost 10 million elm just last year and now was planning another disaster. If he caused more trouble, she would not forgive him. She let out an exasperated shout. At Ledin City Auction House, Deculin's car arrived at the venue. He was not one to waste time on pointless endeavors. He had a clear goal. Finally, he would purchase what he needed. Since first using psychokinesis as his primary form of magic, he realized he required additional metals to compensate for his lack of raw talent. Though he had carried equipment made from steelwood, it was a temporary solution. What he truly needed would be available at today's auction. Pushing open the door, Deculin stepped into the waiting room, but his eyes landed on someone he never expected. His fiancée, Julie. I never thought I'd run into Julie in a place like this, he grumbled internally. At the same time, Julie noticed him, her brows furrowed as she approached with an expression far from pleasant. She remarked that she had heard about two young mages. He had referred to the disciplinary council. Deculin, maintaining a composed and unreadable expression, replied that it was old news and asked if she was here to blame him. Julie pressed further, reminding him that the newcomers were just that and questioning whether he intended to crush their dreams, warning that he would regret it one day and not to repeat past mistakes. Deculin secretly felt a wave of joy at her words, noting that these were perhaps her final words to him, intended to sever ties. Good, he thought. That was exactly how it should be. No matter how beautiful she was, he had no desire to marry and had no reason to bind himself to it. Moreover, Julie was surrounded by deadly variables, including herself, and he could risk dying at his own wedding if not careful. Curious, he asked why she was here, skeptical that she would attend an auction just to confront him. She flared up like an agitated cat, insisting she was there for the auction, not for him. Watching her flustered state, Deculin instinctively raised a hand to calm her. All right, relax. I heard you the first time. Julie puffed out her cheeks in frustration before turning and walking away with determination. Deculin let out a small, amused smile, thinking she was actually kind of cute. This was the first time he had seen her like this. Then he froze, questioning the strange feeling that had just washed over him. Was he being influenced by Deculin's emotions? He had always been cautious to avoid merging his personality with Deculin's. Something's not right. My heart... It suddenly sped up when I looked at her. At that moment, an announcement echoed through the hall. Attention, esteemed guests of Schatzel. The auction is about to begin. Time passed, and inside the grand hall, a large table stood at the center of the stage, draped with a cloth concealing an item beneath it. The auctioneer, glancing at his assistant, nodded as the covering was pulled away, revealing the first piece, a porcelain vase. With enthusiasm, he began the sales pitch, presenting the vase as an exquisite Eastern masterpiece. From Deculin's perspective, intense golden auras radiated from the vase, nearly blinding him. The brilliance matched the same light he had seen when checking Julie's documents, and it was growing even stronger. Meanwhile, the auctioneer continued calling out the bids. Bidder 993 offers 700,000. Bidder 1038 offers 750,000. Bidder 1413 offers 1,500,000. Oh, bidder 777 offers 2,500,000. Congratulations to bidder 777 on securing the item. From Deculin's viewpoint, his innate sense as a financial magnate allowed him to immediately gauge the true value of the auctioned items. He had no qualms about spending lavishly to acquire them. The vase never lost its radiant glow, even as the price skyrocketed, meaning its actual worth was still far beyond the current bids. With a hefty sum sitting in his account, further investments seemed entirely reasonable. His current balance stood at 205,238,039. Deculin began sweeping up a series of auction items into his collection. The ring of Rollerine sold for 3 million, Lucas scissors for 2.1 million, and the necklace of speech for 4.3 million, all to bidder 777. This time, another item went for 5.5 million. Around the room, attendees couldn't help but notice the person recklessly throwing around massive sums. Wow, bidder 777 is buying everything. Isn't that Professor Deculin? Whispers spread quickly. Elsewhere, Julie observed his extravagant spending and let out a derisive sigh, mocking him in her mind. That pathetic man. He just has to attract attention no matter where he goes. He's nothing like me. Unbelievable. How could someone waste so much money for a fleeting moment of vanity? I don't get why he doesn't know the meaning of modesty, but whatever, that's his problem. All I need to focus on is winning the Winter Flame. Julie reminded herself of her goal and quickly refocused on the auction. The event had reached its climax. The last item of the evening, a treasure so rare that many sought it, yet few had ever laid eyes on it, was about to be revealed. A mineral that has been used throughout history to forge countless legendary swords. A natural miracle, the Winter Flame, Snowstone, the auctioneer announced. The velvet cloth covering the item was pulled aside, revealing a shimmering azure blue mineral glowing with an ethereal radiance. Both Deculin and Julie widened their eyes in shock. This was why they had come tonight. One of the 10 rarest metals in the world, Snowstone was prized for forging swords and other weapons. Its paradoxical blend of ice and fire made it an unparalleled crafting material, second only to legendary tier materials like Dragon Bone. Snowstone is the best material I could possibly obtain. I must have it. This is exactly what I need, Deculin thought, sharing a silent determination with Julie. But they weren't the only ones eager for it. The room was filled with bidders vying for the ultra-rare artifact. The numbers started climbing rapidly, 10 million, 13 million, 20 million, 25 million. Bidder 1089 offers 30 million. Is there anyone else? If not, this item will go. A joyful expression appeared on Julie's face. Bidder 1089 was her. Yes, it's almost mine, she thought, thrilled. But before she could celebrate, Deculin ruthlessly intervened. Bidder 777 offers 31 million. Julie's eyes went blank for a moment before burning with fury as she turned to glare at him. Bidder 777. How many times have I heard that number today? I can't ignore him anymore. What the hell are you doing, Deculin? And so the bidding war began. The numbers skyrocketed as they relentlessly outbid each other, driving all other competitors out of the race. Among the onlookers, a man who recognized Deculin whispered, "Are you planning to use the snowstone to forge a sword? Must be for your fiancée." Huh? If it's a gift, why not let her buy it herself? You must really love her. The comment caused Deculin to glance at Julie, realizing, wait, I'm actually competing against my fiancée. She wants the snowstone just as much as I do. If I win, she'll hate me, but I need it too. This is the first time in 3 years that snowstone has appeared on the market. Who knows when the next opportunity will come? Sure, this might put me in danger, but for my own sake, for my items, I must win. The outcome soon became clear. The snowstone now belonged to one person. Final bid, 42 million. The winning bidder is guest number 777. A round of applause erupted across the auction hall. Guests marveled at Deculin's audacity and extravagance. Behind notorious criminals in combat. To grow stronger, he needed to improve his magic quality and gather 4 more shop coins. A knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts. He called out for the visitor to come in. Alan, his assistant, peeked inside and greeted him, holding up a newspaper with a serious expression. Deculin took it and saw the front page featuring a long-haired criminal, the headline warning of the wizard killer Lockhart spotted on the outskirts. Having played through this storyline many times, Deculin recognized the danger. Lockhart was a significant early-stage threat to magic users, but Deculin reassured Alan that there was no need to worry. He was merely heading to the library and instructed Alan to rest at home. Then, a thought struck him, and he turned back to ask if Alan would like to become a professor's assistant. Alan was stunned, recalling how Deculin had always called him incompetent. Deculin clarified that he was serious and had long planned to select an assistant, as every other professor had one. Without waiting for Alan's hesitation, Deculin handed him a bracelet engraved with the Euclina family emblem, telling him to keep working hard. Alan accepted it with deep gratitude, marveling at the emblem and nearly in tears from happiness. Deculin reflected on Alan's reliability. Unlike others who had grown weary of his harshness, Alan had persevered, handling documents and errands alone. Realizing the risk of losing him, Deculin also handed Alan some money as a small token of employee benefits and instructed him to take the rest of the day off. Alan hesitated at the unexpected generosity, but Deculin ignored him and left for the library, leaving his assistant staring after him in disbelief. As Deculin walked, his mind was occupied with Luna's documents, which contained flawed research on pure elements that he needed to correct. Finding books on elemental manipulation would be a bonus, so he quickened his pace. Passing a bookshelf, he noticed a small figure, Sylvia, and asked why she was in the staff library. Sylvia froze, startled, and quickly explained that Professor Rhett had granted her permission to access materials. Deculin remained stern, noting that both the professor and librarian had disregarded academy rules to let her in, suggesting they deserved disciplinary action. Before she could respond further, Deculin used telekinesis to take the book from her hands, inspecting it. It was Ethanol, a rare romantic novel, which she had acquired despite breaking the rules. Deculin's tone carried amusement as he commented on her choice, causing Sylvia's face to flush. She tried to explain that her interest was purely in literature and languages. Deculin tossed the book back to her and let her off with a warning. If she came again without proper authorization, she would face discipline. He advised her to have someone else borrow the book if her goal wasn't to flaunt family influence, and then turned and left, leaving Sylvia dazed and clutching the book. wondering how he could even read ethanol, given its inconsistent language. The scene then transitioned to a pine forest. At that moment, an outdoor lesson was underway for the freshmen. Some students chased after small creatures while others gathered herbs. To ensure safety, 3 professors, including Deculin, supervised the session. Off to the side, the chubby Professor Retton wiped sweat from his drenched face and remarked on how calm the students were, despite it being their first field training on Black Mountain. He admitted he had expected them to be afraid and, though the session needed to end before nightfall, he still felt proud. Deculin, meanwhile, observed the area quietly. He noted that Black Mountain, distant from the academy, was of great significance and protected by strict security due to the magic tower. Its forest served both as a student training ground and a rich source of magical materials, but the high risk of attacks from monsters and poisonous creatures necessitated reinforced protective barriers and constant patrols by professors. Raylon, scratching his head as if remembering something, turned to Deculin and mentioned that this week's patrol duty still needed to be assigned. Without hesitation, Deculin volunteered, prompting brief surprise in Professor Retton before he nodded approvingly and complimented Deculin's leadership, calling it exactly what a model professor should display. Deculin, however, remained expressionless, thinking to himself that his motivation was not some noble sense of duty. Glancing at the mission screen that had just appeared, Deculin saw a side quest, The Darkness of the Magic Tower, with a reward of 1 shop coin and an additional title bonus. He felt an inexplicable pull in his mind, realizing that something significant was about to occur on the mountain. Furrowing his brows, he pondered the situation as the other professors began gathering the students. Soon, the field training ended, with students bidding their professors goodbye before heading off. 9 hours later, in a cafe near the Magic Tower, the young mage Ephraim treated her friends to ice cream sundaes after receiving her funding. The friends marveled at the dazzling desserts, remarking how beautiful and delicious they looked. Ephraim grinned, encouraging them to dig in, silently noting that she now had 100,000 gold. Her close friend Rhett Lon mentioned that he had submitted their club formation plan, which should be approved soon, prompting concern from a blue-haired boy across the table about whether enough students would join. Julia reassured him confidently that as long as they ran the club well, more members would come. Ephraim, still staring at her sundae, confirmed there had been 50 volunteers at Black Mountain today, despite a number of accidents. Just as she spoke, a loud noise startled the group, and a desperate voice called out for help. Panic set in, and they rushed toward the sound. Ephraim's heart raced as she increased her speed, but Julia sensed something was off and tried to stop her. Ephraim, confused, asked what Julia had said, only to realize that she was no longer in town but in an unfamiliar forest. The desperate voice repeated its call, and Ephraim, determined to help, ran toward it. Ahead stood a young woman with long hair covering her face. Ephraim asked if she was okay, but blood suddenly spurted from the girl, her screams echoing through the forest. Alarmed, Ephraim gathered mana into her fists, ready to defend her. Then, a cold figure appeared. Deculin, surrounded by floating, razor-sharp steelwood shards. Ephraim assumed the worst, asking if he had attacked the woman. Deculin's icy tone cut through her fear as he told her to open her eyes and look again. When she did, the woman had vanished, replaced by a monstrous humanoid being with deep red skin and eyes, white smoke seeping from its mouth, exuding a menacing aura. Ephraim instinctively stepped back, stammering in fear. Deculin glanced at her briefly and explained that she had fallen under an illusion spell, the work of demons, advising her to stay out of it and leave. Using his telekinesis, he forcibly removed her from the battlefield. Once she was out of sight, Deculin focused on the demon, muttering that it was time for the hunt. The red-skinned demon, enraged at losing its prey, lunged at him. Blows collided violently in the dark night, and the demon screamed as it aimed its massive claws at Deculin's chest. He swiftly manipulated his steelwood shards to form a barrier, sparks flying as he stepped back to assess the situation. Focusing on the glowing core on the demon's forehead, Deculin analyzed its abilities, realizing its main power was illusions, which his mental resistance rendered ineffective. Then, the Euclina bloodline surged within him, filling him with rage. The unique attribute of his lineage allowed him to purify surrounding dark mana and enhance his strength when facing demons. The more he tapped into it, however, the more aggressive he became, gradually losing control. Channeling this fury, Deculin clenched his fists, his gaze colder than ever, determined not to let the demon survive. With a growl, he launched forward, steelwood shards slicing through the air. Time passed swiftly, and soon the massive demon lay motionless in a pool of its own blood, with not a trace of life remaining. At that moment, a notification appeared before Deculin. The side quest, The Darkness of the Magic Tower, was complete, granting him one shop currency, an additional title, the first demon kill, and unlocking the Euclina attribute. Lowering his gaze, Deculin scoffed at the lifeless corpse of the demon, muttering to himself that even in death, it remained a filthy creature of corruption. Yet despite the victory, a faint unease crept into his mind. The appearance of this demon was unusual, he realized. This was only the beginning, a game more challenging than ever before. Time passed quickly until morning. The scene shifted to the Academy's hospital, where the genius mage Ephraim suddenly woke from her unconscious state. A nurse noticed immediately and addressed her, calling her Luna. Confused, Ephraim turned to scan her surroundings and asked what had happened, mentioning the forest. Anticipating her question, the nurse explained that a demon had appeared at Black Mountain the previous night. Ephraim had been hidden by its dark magic and lost consciousness, only to be found and brought to the hospital. The mountain had been sealed off, and the magic tower was investigating. The nurse added that Professor Deculin had been the one to save her. Ephraim groaned inwardly, frustrated at the mention of him again. Remembering the time, she hurriedly asked what day it was. The nurse considered and replied that it had been 36 hours since she was brought in, Wednesday. Ephraim's eyes widened in shock, and panic surged through her. Realizing she was late, she bolted from the hospital toward the lecture hall. By the time she arrived, she was panting heavily, catching the attention of her best friend Julia, who waved and expressed concern. Ephraim nodded, assuring her she was fine, even joking that she had slept so much she felt in the best shape ever. Her gaze fell on strange materials on the table, and she frowned, asking if there had been an announcement about the lesson she had missed. Julia shook her head, admitting she had no idea and speculating that today's class might be special. Soon, Deculin and his teaching assistant Alan entered the classroom. Deculin's deep, steady voice announced the introduction of his assistant, causing the entire class to widen their eyes in disbelief. Whispers and murmurs spread as students reacted, astonished that someone had become Deculin's assistant. Ephraim, understanding the difficulty of such an achievement, felt a wave of tension and unease. Deculin stated that today's lesson would be based on real-world experience and instructed the students to complete an assignment within 3 hours. Alan distributed clocks to each student, emphasizing the time limit. Ephraim's mind, however, was in disarray. Thoughts of her father's legacy and her own ambitions clouded her focus, leaving her distracted. She muttered to herself, questioning why her father had never been given a chance and why Deculin was suddenly performing acts of generosity. Despite her determination, her mind remained cluttered, making it impossible to concentrate on the assignment. Suddenly, Sylvia, a genius in the class, announced that she had completed the task in just 25 minutes and 50 seconds. Flowers bloomed before her, radiating dazzling brilliance, leaving the other students astonished. Ephraim clenched her teeth in frustration, determined to complete her work as well. One by one, the other students finished and left the classroom under Deculin's dismissal, but Ephraim remained, unable to complete the task. The sky darkened outside as she sat in despair, berating herself for being unable to match Sylvia's speed and skill. Finally, as she stood, ready to leave, Deculin's cold voice sliced through the silence, noting the exact time she had taken. Ephraim froze in shock. He criticized her for struggling with a simple assignment, warning her that, with such a weak mindset, she would never reach his level. Then he turned and left, leaving her to process his words. Though frustrated and angry, Ephraim clenched her fists and resolved to complete the task, igniting her determination like a raging fire. Deculin, in truth, had not left. He remained just outside the classroom, silently sensing the fluctuations of mana within. Observing Ephraim's focused energy, he sighed in relief, knowing that the hours he had spent pushing her were necessary. He anticipated her growth, aware that the appearance of the demon on Black Mountain marked the unfolding of the main storyline. Though she lacked the mental fortitude of a true mage, overcoming this obstacle would allow her to improve at an incredible pace, eventually gaining power that might one day challenge him, though he intended to prevent that. As Deculin contemplated this, the classroom door burst open. Ephraim stormed out, her expression dark and filled with frustration, unaware that he was still there. Deculin calmly stepped inside, inspecting the results of her efforts. Brilliant flowers had bloomed, radiating dazzling brilliance, earning a subtle smile from him despite his usually cold demeanor. 6 hours and 25 minutes had passed, and the assignment was complete. He pulled out a sheet with Ephraim's image and began noting her performance, muttering that although she displayed the typical weaknesses of an academy student, her result was worthy of contention for first place. A system notification appeared. The side quest Your Own Path was complete, awarding him 1 store credit. Exhausted, Deculin began making his way across the campus when a lively voice called out, greeting him. He turned sharply, tension and cold sweat creeping down his back. It was Zeit. A flood of memories hit him. The hulking man before him was Zeit von Bugenfrieden, head of the Freden family, Julie's older brother, and the one who had pushed for Deculin's engagement to Julie. Most importantly, Zeit's combat strength in the early stages of the game surpassed even Ganesha, ranking 3rd in sheer power. A terrifying fighter known for his overwhelming battle prowess, Zeit was seeking Deculin. Why was someone like him looking for him? Deculin wondered if it had something to do with Julie's snowstone. As the thought crossed his mind, a surge of internal warning sirens blared in his head. He gulped hard, anxiety knotting in his stomach. Is this some kind of death flag? I don't even have a contingency plan for dealing with this monster, he thought. Meanwhile, Zeit, completely unaware of Deculin's inner panic, continued to grin cheerfully. He commented that he had heard about the tension between Deculin and Julie, and, wanting to ease his worry, had arranged a dinner for the week. You're free, right? Zeit asked, his tone casual. Deculin exhaled subtly, relieved. For now, Zeit seemed friendly. Just as he opened his mouth to respond, a massive hand landed firmly on his shoulder. Haha, I love that decisiveness, Zeit said with a beaming smile. I've already prepared all your favorite dishes, so just come by. I've got everything handled. Don't worry about a thing. With a pat that felt more like a command than an invitation, Zeit added, I'll be expecting you, Professor Deculin. See you soon. Watching Zeit's massive figure disappear, Deculin couldn't shake the gnawing unease. He hadn't even been given a chance to refuse. More accurately, it was impossible to refuse. Zeit always put his family above all else, and Deculin knew the consequences of defying him could be severe. Canceling simply wasn't an option. The next day, at the Freden estate, Julie was informed about the dinner. Unsurprisingly, she was far from pleased. I don't want to see him. Besides, I'm busy with cavalry training. I don't have time for this, she declared defiantly. Zeit let out a small sigh, a hint of frustration on his face. You're just mad about losing that snowstone, aren't you? He asked. Julie shot back immediately. Mad? Oh please. As if. Zeit pressed further, questioning why she wanted a rare or only useful for forging weapons. Before he could finish, Julie snapped, If he's planning to give me a sword, then I'll break off the engagement on the spot. Her face was livid. Zeit, visibly losing patience, radiated an oppressive aura. Bulging veins traced his neck and face as he spoke in a dangerously low voice, warning Julie to think carefully. I specifically told you the other day how foolish that would be. There is no place for personal emotions in politics, and as far as I know, There isn't a single man in love with you. Unless you've taken a liking to someone. Julie cut him off, clenching her teeth. I don't. Seeing her stubborn yet resigned expression, Zeit's demeanor softened slightly. Do you care that much about Deculin's past? He asked. This has nothing to do with that, she replied immediately. Zeit pressed further, asking why, but Julie had no answer and fell silent. Deciding not to push further, Zeit turned to leave, throwing one final remark over his shoulder. Just make sure you show up on time. If there's a problem, fix it. Julie remained motionless, frustration and helplessness surging through her. To vent, she launched into a frenzied sword practice session, the sharp whooshing of her blade tearing through the training grounds. The dirt beneath her feet bore the consequences of her relentless strikes. A calm voice interrupted. Your strikes are a mess, my lady, said a man dressed in black. It was Varen, Julie's trusted subordinate. Julie exhaled slowly, regaining some composure. Varen, I'm sorry you had to witness me like this, she murmured. Varen's face remained unreadable. There is nothing to apologize for, my lady. I still can't believe our esteemed family head is forcing you to marry that man. Julie's sharp gaze cut through his words. Enough, she said, leaving no room for argument. As a knight, speaking ill of someone behind their back does not suit you. Don't dirty your hands for my sake. I'm fine. Without another word, she turned on her heels. I'm heading back. Prepare yourself. Varen watched her walk away, silently deciding, my lady, I finally found my answer to this suffering. I will prove my loyalty. I will make you happy. A dangerous glint flashed in his eyes as he gripped the hilt of his sword. Meanwhile, the Council of Elders convened an emergency meeting due to the demon that had appeared at Black Mountain. Elder Burke addressed the chamber sternly, noting that while the mages had initially suppressed the demon's corruption using forbidden arts, its reappearance required immediate action. Orders were given to alert the 12 great houses to assemble. Back with Deculin, he carefully sorted through the items he had won at auction. Murmuring to himself, he noted the usefulness of Rupertine's ring to replenish his mana and a runic pendant to store excess energy. The rest of the items would be safely stored underground, following Ganesha's advice to prevent theft. However, the most important item, the snow quartz, remained completely unusable. Locked within a reinforced cabinet, it rejected all attempts to channel mana. Expensive and rare in the game, Deculin could only admire it from afar, frustrated at his inability to utilize it despite his efforts. Then a thought struck him. If he melted it down, could he control it with his will? The more he considered it, the more plausible the idea became. He decided he should check the library for its properties. In theory, a sword could be tamed through communication. Did that mean he had to connect with the stone to understand it? If that was the case, there was no more hesitation. He immediately reached out and lightly touched the snow quartz. In an instant, an intense burst of light erupted from the stone, engulfing the entire room. A moment later, Deculin pulled his hand away with a sigh. A notification appeared before him. Comprehension plus 0.1%. Mana 1.3573.357 plus 300. Looking at how much mana he had consumed to tame the snow quartz, Deculin could only shake his head in frustration. At this rate, it would take him a whole year to tame the stone. Is there a way to do this more efficiently? With a sigh, he glanced at the calendar beside him and muttered to himself about the evening's plans. Dinner with Zeit and another event, which had been arranged 3 days before his death, before he had taken over this body. That evening, the meeting took place at Bonmikiel Restaurant, where Zeit had arranged for Deculin to meet. As soon as he arrived, the Freyan family head grinned and welcomed him, noting that Julie had gone in first and was waiting inside. Zeit gave Deculin a hearty slap on the shoulder before leading him into the private dining room. Inside, Zeit's voice rang out in admiration, remarking on how stunning Julie looked in an elegant outfit, a stark contrast to the armor she usually wore. Even someone as cold as Deculin couldn't help but react slightly. She usually wore armor, but when dressed up, she looked incredible. No wonder the old Deculin had been so obsessed with her. Beside them, Julie crossed her arms, sounding a bit annoyed as she reminded everyone of the effort she had put into her appearance. But Zeit paid little attention. After taking his seat, he turned to another woman in the room and asked about her presence. The woman smiled softly, explaining that she had come along to take care of Julie. From Deculin's perspective, the unfamiliar woman's presence made him uneasy. He realized he had been too focused on Julie and did not want to meet Josephine here. Even though she was his fiancée's older sister, Josephine was not someone to underestimate. She was the master of darkness, head of a covert intelligence organization, incredibly strong and fiercely protective of Julie. Anyone who dared harm Julie would face her wrath. Deculin sensed the overwhelming killing intent Josephine radiated toward him the moment he entered the room. He reminded himself that he had no choice but to play his role and make it seem as though he cherished Julie, the only way to survive. Meanwhile, Zeit, completely unaware of Deculin's internal panic, was enthusiastically steering the conversation toward the wedding. Professor Deculin, when do you plan to hold the wedding ceremony? It's been 3 years since the engagement, hasn't it? Before Deculin could answer, Julie instinctively tried to protest, but Zeit silenced her with a firm gesture, insisting that it was an affair for the adults. Julie's eyes dimmed with frustration. Her lips pressed tightly together as if holding back words she couldn't say. Deculin instinctively glanced at Josephine, who, though appearing indifferent, kept her piercing gaze locked onto him. A shiver ran down his spine as his body tensed. Carefully, he delivered the words he had prepared. He would leave the decision to Julie and was willing to walk away if she didn't trust in the marriage. His gentle tone, however, only made Julie grit her teeth in fury. Zeit, the family head, simply sighed, reminding Deculin that marriage was not something to be taken lightly and that the elders would not accept a whimsical decision. Julie could no longer hold back. Master of the house, please let us speak in private. I beg you. Zeit, sensing his sister's emotional state, nodded and allowed Josephine to accompany Julie out of the room. Before leaving, Josephine waved playfully, flashing a mischievous grin. Once the door clicked shut, Julie's voice turned ice cold. She demanded to know what Deculin was trying to do and what he really wanted, glaring at him with pure resentment. Outside, Josephine remained in the hallway, silent and listening intently to the private conversation unfolding behind the closed doors. Deculin did not dare respond immediately. Instead, he stole a glance toward the door, aware that Josephine was still there. She acted as though she had left, but it was only a ruse to conceal her eavesdropping. Yet this was also an opportunity. Josephine did not know he had noticed her, and Deculin truly loved Julie. If he could convince Josephine of that, he could avoid his deadly fate. With that thought, he activated his top-tier acting skills, putting on a deeply emotional expression. He spoke with care, admitting that neither of them could cancel the engagement, as things had gone too far. Hearing this, Julie clenched her fists tightly, her voice trembling with anger. Julie's voice was ice-cold, her words laced with fury. She demanded to know what disgusting method Deculin was planning to torment her this time. Before their engagement, he had used his influence to force the marriage upon her, promising to compensate the elders of her family. She reminded him of the exact words he had used to convince her, "Fighting is dangerous." Because of that, she had abandoned her pursuit of the Empire's will. He had offered her the captaincy of the Haydn Knights, an order under the Uckline family, and when she had refused, he spread all sorts of rumors about her. "What the hell do you want from me?" she asked, tears streaming down her face as she stared at him, waiting for his answer. Seeing her tearful expression, Deculin fell silent. Inside, he thought, "I know everything." The original Deculin had mistaken obsessive desire for love, destroying everything around Julie to keep her by his side. He had committed unforgivable acts, leaving him to understand her resentment more than anyone else. Finally, he spoke, voice steady. "I won't do that again. I don't believe you." Julie screamed in response, but his next words caught her completely off guard. He admitted he had pushed her too far and acknowledged his mistakes, but reminded her that her sister and brother had also overstepped, Their opposition to annulling the engagement wasn't just for family honor, he explained. She should leave her family behind to pursue her dream of becoming a guardian, knights loyal only to the emperor. Julie, I am neither honest nor loyal. I am the complete opposite of your ideal. I'm not the right person for you. The only thing I can do is maintain our engagement, but never marry you. I truly want you to be free, but with the tangled web surrounding us, I can't make that happen. You can use my name to protect yourself. Until you achieve your dream, I will wait and uphold our engagement. Julie's anger melted away, replaced by doubt. What are you trying to do? Why say all of this now? She asked. Deculin's tone remained unchanged. He expected nothing from his confession, but if he could ask for one thing, he wanted to see her smile just once a month. His voice carried a subtle sorrow. Hearing this, Julie's face flushed crimson, her voice trembling. Even Josephine, who had been eavesdropping outside, blushed in shock, leaving Zeit utterly confused. Deculin had been lost in thought moments ago, speaking only to survive, yet seeing Julie flustered made her look adorable. He had to admit his feelings for her had become his own. Julie's embarrassment deepened as she shouted, "Are you trying to deceive me with such embarrassing words? I don't believe you anyway. I will never believe in your schemes." Deculin laughed quietly, which only made her redder. "Why are you laughing? I already told you. I won't believe you," she snapped. Outside, Josephine, convinced by Deculin's acting, felt at ease but remained curious, wondering if his feelings were real. 3 days later, Deculin sat in his luxurious car, deep in thought as he watched the scenery pass. The Memorial Day had arrived, and the vehicle stopped at a cemetery. Instructing his driver to wait outside, he entered alone, feeling his emotions swirl. The sound of footsteps in a graveyard had a way of stirring the heart. Sunlight filtered through grass and tombstone cracks, and his heart softened in the presence of memories. Not his own, but those of Kim Woo Jensen. His gaze fell on a particular gravestone, and an image of his ex-girlfriend, Ra, flashed in his mind, her beautiful smile etched in memory. Back then, during a late-night break, his girlfriend had excitedly suggested adding an Easter egg to the game, a small addition to Deculin's backstory. She had even gotten author approval. Deculin had responded with a bored sigh, tossing his empty coffee cup into the trash. "That's just going to increase our workload. We've been working all night. It won't directly affect sales. Stop making more work for us." Era had crossed her arms, insisting that it was important to put heart into the game. Deculin had sighed, telling her to do as she wished, noting she wasn't truly asking for his opinion. Era had smiled, amused by his response, and remarked that it wasn't pointless, as Deculin had a late fiancé too. He had never understood why she found it so amusing, why her smile was so bright after adding the Easter egg to preserve Kim Woo Jensen's memories. Now, standing before the tombstone, Deculin read the inscription, "You are Raven Fergus Mahan. Always grateful to you." He froze, overwhelmed by emotion. Why had she engraved his name? Deculin had been created based on Kim Woo Jin. Why had Era used her own name for his late fiancé? And why thank him? Slowly, he reached out, fingers grazing the cold stone. A deep wave of emotion surged through him, tears welling and falling. Memories flooded back. Her praise for his drawings, draping her coat over him in the cold, holding his hand, telling him she loved him, lifting him up when he was exhausted. 7 years together, always by his side. The more he remembered, the harder he cried. Unbeknownst to him, a strange man watched from afar, teeth grinding in fury. "I finally found you, you filthy wizard," he muttered. Deculin's tear-streaked face faded, replaced by his usual cold expression, as he turned to leave. "Now that I've calmed down, it's as if I never cried at all," he thought. Suddenly, the man stepped in front of him, and Deculin murmured, "A familiar face. Lockhart, isn't it?" His eyes focused on the long-haired man, dagger in hand, radiating a terrifying bloodlust. It was Lockhart, the mage slayer featured on wanted posters. Realizing Deculin recognized him, Lockhart snarled, "You know about me? Well, isn't that interesting? How dare a cocky, insignificant little wizard like you speak?" Deculin didn't respond, processing everything he knew about Lockhart. A mid-tier antagonist, natural enemy to all wizards, with the ability to nullify magic without limits. Even physical force was useless against him. Just as Lockhart lunged, Deculin activated his telekinetic abilities, launching stone shards toward him. Yet the shards froze midair, as if blocked by an invisible barrier. Deculin's brows furrowed. "I knew this already, but it's still infuriating. Magic is completely useless within his range." As Deculin muttered to himself, Lockhart threw his head back and burst into laughter. "Haha, you fool of a wizard. Magic doesn't work on me." Lockhart swung his dagger, slashing straight at Deculin, but he swiftly leapt back, dodging with ease. Lockhart didn't stop, lunging forward relentlessly, his arm moving like a machine, striking again and again. Yet Deculin, with his sharp observational skills, predicted each attack effortlessly, weaving through the strikes without breaking a sweat. Most wizards would have trembled before Lockhart, overwhelmed by his magic nullifying ability, but Deculin was different. At that moment, Lockhart kicked off the ground, launching himself into the air with his dagger aimed directly at Deculin. "Die!" he roared. The only response he received was a devastating punch to the face. Crack. The sheer force sent blood gushing from Lockhart's nose, his body hurtling through the air like a discarded ragdoll. Lying on the ground, blood dripping from his face, he barely had time to react before a brutal kick landed squarely on his jaw. Deculin's cold voice rang out. "That means nothing to me." Lockhart let out a furious snarl, preparing to curse him, but a vicious boot to the face silenced him. A few days ago, Deculin had collected 10 shop coins and purchased an upgrade that enhanced his mana quality. The upgrade drastically boosted his mana control efficiency. Shortly after unlocking it, he had tested his newfound power by attempting to lift a chair with telekinesis. Instead of simple levitation, the chair had rocketed through the ceiling and lodged itself in the roof. Looks like I need to completely readjust my control. I only wanted to lift it slightly, but this is ridiculous. Now, however, he realized his mana output had drastically increased, and the ability seemed to have a far greater area of effect than expected. "Well, I guess I'll just go back to my usual routine." Deculin shrugged off his jacket, tossing it aside before effortlessly pulling himself up onto a pull-up bar to resume his daily workout. As he grabbed the bar, something felt off. His fingers sank into the metal. Startled, he quickly let go and looked at the deep imprints left behind. "What the hell? I thought this upgrade only slightly enhanced my abilities, but instead it's dramatically increased my raw physical strength." Reality returned. Lockhart lay sprawled on the ground, completely wrecked. Villain's fate avoided, shop coins +2. Deculin barely paid attention to the system notification, his cold gaze fixed on Lockhart, beaten like a mangy dog. I knew enhanced mana quality would apply as an attribute. With Iron Body, I could already overpower him, but now with this upgrade, it's even easier than I expected. Lockhart's body trembled uncontrollably as he struggled to rise, spitting curses through gritted teeth. "Damn it! I should have been the one to wipe out you wretched sorcerers. You heretical scum, traitors against Vism, against God. You arrogant brats, lunatics. All of you without magic. You're just useless insects." Deculin, ever the dignified nobleman, remained unfazed by the senseless ranting. He pondered, this man's ability is powerful enough to be considered a cheat. His hatred toward sorcerers, his expression, the way he speaks. Narrowing his eyes, Deculin asked, "Lockhart, are you a descendant of the Crimson Tribe?" For the first time, Lockhart's rage was replaced by shock. His wide, unblinking stare bore into Deculin, and after a long pause, he hesitantly muttered, "How do you know that?" The Crimson Tribe, born from bloodshed, traced its lineage to ancient demons scattered across the continent. Living in hiding, their existence had always been at odds with sorcerers. Just as magic was created to combat demons, The conflict between sorcerers and the Crimson Tribe had become a fundamental pillar of this world. Though persecuted for the sins of their ancestors, not their own, another cleansing was likely occurring somewhere at that very moment. Deculin's gaze softened. Lockhurk, I understand you. The oppression you've endured must have been unbearable. But if you kill an innocent sorcerer, you'll become just as monstrous as those you despise. Lockhurk's face twisted in rage like a man unaccustomed to sympathy. Shut up. What the hell do you know? Stop spouting nonsense and just kill me already. Deculin remained calm, voice steady. I know because the Crimson Tribe is innocent. Lockhurk's body stiffened, his rage faltering for a brief moment, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. Then he scoffed. What the hell did you just say? Taking a step forward, Deculin declared, I am Deculin of House Euclina, a family of noble blood, one that has never lost its honor. Lockhurk gritted his teeth. What are you trying to preach to me before you kill me? Deculin's voice remained steady. The only time I ever lost my honor was when I stood before a demon. House Euclina had hunted demons for generations, cursed with an instinct, a madness that took hold the moment they laid eyes on them. Deculin's cold blue eyes locked onto Lockhurk as he spoke, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. But tell me, Lockhurk, have I lost my honor while standing before you? Did I waver at your provocations? Did I succumb to madness? His final words struck with precision. You are human. You can trust me. Lockhurk's face turned completely blank, a strange thought crossing his mind. Perhaps this was what true nobility looked like. At that moment, a distant voice called out, Over here! Hurry up! Deculin swiftly delivered a precise kick to Lockhurk's chin, sending him spitting blood before collapsing unconscious. Just stay put and turn yourself in, he muttered, though Lockhurk could no longer hear him. Soon after, two men rushed over. One straightened and saluted, introducing himself. I'm Inspector Ribbar. That was one hell of a kick. You really live up to your name, Professor Deculin. As for this murderer, should I give him a few extra kicks for good measure? Ribbar's voice was filled with anger as he glanced down at Lockhurk, but Deculin stepped in just in time to stop him. No need. Just leave him be. With that, Deculin activated his telekinetic power. A mound of sand shifted from a distance, gradually forming into a sturdy rope. Inspector Ribbar couldn't hide his astonishment. I never imagined magic could be this incredible. Deculin handed him the rope and calmly warned, This man has the ability to nullify magic. Spells won't work on him. Instead, use this to restrain him. Ribbar nodded in understanding. Deculin then asked, How did you get here so quickly? Weren't you on patrol? Inspector Ribbar shook his head slightly. We came as soon as we received a report. Didn't you call it in, Professor? It wasn't me. Someone else must have heard the commotion and reported it. Deculin replied. Well, I'll be heading off then. You take care of things here. Understood, Ribbar responded swiftly. For Deculin, this encounter with Lockhurk was nothing more than a minor incident, resolved without unnecessary bloodshed. There were still traces of that person in the area, and he had no desire to taint it with violence. The next day, scene shifted to Euclina Manor, Deculin's training room. His younger sister, Julie, was present, delivering a summon from the Burke Council, the first meeting in 15 years. Deculin paused his training, reached out, and took the letter. You came all this way just to hand me this scroll? He asked nonchalantly. Julie looked exasperated. Since you don't care, I had to come myself. Isn't it the head of the household's duty to look after the family? And when are you finally going to put some clothes on? Ignoring her complaint, Deculin unrolled the letter and skimmed through it. It reported a demon sighting in Black Mountain and stated that the Burke Council had summoned the noble houses for a discussion. Simultaneously, the system issued him a main quest, the Summons of Burke. After reading, Deculin turned to Julie. It's scheduled to happen in a week. I'm allowed to bring one person along as a bodyguard. Julie raised an eyebrow in surprise. You need a bodyguard? Then I'll have Jeff go with you. He used to be a mercenary. Deculin shook his head. That won't be necessary, especially not Jeff. He's more familiar with steering a ship than wielding a weapon. Julie scoffed but then grew serious, her gaze tinged with concern. You can't go without a bodyguard. I've been there before. The journey to Burke is dangerous, even life-threatening. Deculin paused, studying her before asking, "Are you worried about me? In your dreams, don't say creepy things like that," Julie shouted. After a brief silence, she added, "I just can't have you dying before I officially take the position of head of the family from you." Still flustered, she quickly changed the subject. "I'll handle the bodyguard situation. I'll make sure to hire someone reliable." Scene transitioned to the Freyan military camp. Julie was in the middle of training a group of soldiers. Not far away, the deputy commander stood watching, his expression deeply troubled. "What should I do?" A voice suddenly spoke from behind. "What exactly do you mean by that?" The unexpected voice startled the deputy commander, who shouted, "At least make some noise when you walk. Varen, we've got a big business opportunity coming our way. But there's something about it that makes me uneasy. I don't know if we should accept it or not." Varen raised an eyebrow. "Stop overthinking. Just tell me what's bothering you." The older man sighed in frustration before explaining. The mission was to protect Deculin, more precisely to safeguard the entire train. If asked directly to guard the whole train, they wouldn't have accepted, hence the careful wording. The deputy commander spoke measuredly, unaware of the slight tremor in Varen's hand when he heard Deculin's name. Instantly, Varen masked his reaction and offered his advice. "Take the job. Not just anyone can protect an entire train. If they succeeded, their army's reputation would skyrocket, and money would no longer be a concern. They were, after all, a private military force." Still, the deputy commander hesitated, but Varen cut him off coldly when the subject turned to Deculin. It did not matter. Their commander was not the type to let personal feelings interfere with a mission. The deputy commander, understanding this, nodded in agreement and quickly excused himself, promising to report to the commander. Varen remained behind, standing perfectly still, his expression icy and unreadable. Burke was the name of the Highland mountain range at the northernmost tip of the continent. At an altitude of 3,500 meters, it was home to the mages known as the Elders of Burke. The region served as the epicenter of all magical disciplines across the continent, a hub where every school of thought and every form of magical research converged. Even the magic towers and the floating islands of archmages could not challenge its authority. Burke's influence was so vast it could be considered the very foundation of the magical world. The Summoning Assembly, an event that occurred only once every few decades, was not only an honor for any mage summoned, but also a recognition of their standing in the magical hierarchy. Yet, a summon from Burke carried a deadly reputation. It was also known as a mage's grave. At Burke train station, Julie's team had gathered in preparation for the journey. She turned to her vice captain to confirm that all preparations were complete. He reassured her confidently, adding that Deculin had arrived. As Julie turned, she saw Deculin approaching, accompanied by his assistant Ilade. He scanned the snowy surroundings with fascination and marveled at the thick snow, remarking to Ilade that it was hard to believe it was already April. Julie stepped forward to greet them, her face flushed red as she thanked them for making the journey and explained that the Freighton Association would take responsibility for guarding half of the train, promising to ensure their safety and comfort during the trip. Even as she spoke, Julie's thoughts drifted to Deculin's words from the previous gathering, a lingering memory that made her body tense. She wondered anxiously whether she should smile and, if so, how brightly or just a small, polite smile. Behind her, the vice captain watched silently as Julie trembled and suffered inwardly, her deep dislike for Deculin at odds with her commitment to give him her best effort. Varen stepped forward and introduced himself as the assigned escort for Deculin, explaining that the others were only present to pay their respects. The vice captain patted Varen on the back, praising his talent and assuring Deculin that there was no cause for concern. Observing this interaction, Deculin furrowed his brows subtly, examining Varen carefully. Despite the praise, He could sense no remarkable energy from the young man and wondered if he was overthinking the matter. Varen, however, remained unaware of the scrutiny, explaining casually that each train car had been assigned a guardian and that he would oversee the one Deculin occupied. Deculin acknowledged him with a slight nod, silently counting on Varen's competence. Once the formalities concluded, Julie prepared to leave, wishing Deculin a safe journey. She turned quickly to walk away but stopped abruptly, forcing a stiff, painfully deliberate smile. Deculin noticed the effort and let out a quiet chuckle, appreciative that she had kept her word. Hours later, inside the carriage, Deculin observed his assistant, Alan, struggling to stay awake. He suggested Alan take a short nap, which the young man gladly accepted, leaning back against the seat. Deculin, meanwhile, contemplated the significance of the summons from Berk. Despite its prestige as the pillar of the magical world, the Berk Grand Assembly was fraught with danger. One of the greatest threats was the attacks on trains during the journey, a deadly intelligence game that had contributed to the original Deculin's death. While the original Deculin might have purchased information from underground sources to navigate safely, the current Deculin had severed all ties with such forces. Instead, he relied on countermeasures he had personally prepared, including mastery of the legendary Estrin combat technique. Alan's sudden, deep sleep struck Deculin as amusing. Just moments ago, the young man had been practically bouncing with excitement over the trip to Berk, a journey Deculin had personally invited him on as his assistant, warning him of the dangers but leaving the choice to accept entirely up to him. Across from him, Alan's eyes widened instantly in shock, and then, overcome with emotion, he seemed on the verge of tears. He struggled to speak, expressing his gratitude for the opportunity. It was an honor, he said, for someone like him to be given such a chance. Despite the display, Deculin still found himself surprised that Alan had agreed to come along, knowing full well the dangers they would face. Perhaps Alan was more ambitious than he had thought. Time passed as the train made a brief stop to let passengers off. Deculin gazed out the window, deep in thought. Only the final stop, Berk, remained, and so far nothing had happened. Had he actually picked the right train? He had prepared meticulously, enhancing a master's attire with Midas hand, reinforcing steelwood fragments throughout the car, and even enchanting Alan's clothing. A frown crossed his face at the thought of how much mana he had spent on preparations. He muttered to himself, hoping for a peaceful journey, though he knew all too well that things rarely went according to plan. Just as the train passed over a massive stone bridge, a sudden explosion ripped through one of the cars, shattering the calm with a deafening blast. A few days earlier, another journey had begun, involving Gilthian and his daughter Sylvia. Inside their car, Gilthian sighed at his daughter's relentless focus on exercises. Even on a train, she wouldn't put her books down. Sylvia, undeterred, remained absorbed in her studies, determined to do everything necessary to become a grand mage. Gilthian chuckled, offering fatherly encouragement, reminding her that her diligence would serve her well in the future. Sylvia's eyes flickered with a trace of frustration, longing to attend more of Deculin's lectures, even if Ephorine did not concern her. Sylvia asked her father why they had departed early for the Berk convocation, noting that they could have waited a few more days. Gilthian fell silent for a long moment, then explained gravely that the journey to Berk was known as a graveyard for mages. Every convocation brought deaths, and 15 years ago, 11 mages had perished. While being summoned to Berk was a symbol of prestige, those who failed to attend were erased from history, replaced by other families. He asked Sylvia if she understood how ambitious families outside the 20 great houses could eliminate others to claim their seats, and she realized the truth. The path to prestige was littered with danger and death. Gilthian explained that the deaths along the journey were viewed by the world as a natural magical selection process. Back in the present, the explosion threw Deculin and Varen on high alert. Narrowing his eyes, Deculin activated his mental force, while the shockwave awoke Alan, who blinked in disbelief at the floating train. Deculin quietly sighed in relief, knowing that his mastery of psychokinesis, combined with Estrin martial arts, had saved them. On top of the train, the attacking assassins stared in shock at the airborne train, struggling to comprehend the scene. One growled, reminding the others to stay focused, promising that the reward would be worth it. They dropped ropes and swung into Deculin's car, smashing windows and scattering shards everywhere. Prepared for the attack, Deculin assessed the intruders coldly, labeling them fools. He unleashed his psychokinesis, hurling steel fragments and splintered wood at the assassins, tearing them apart before they could even regain their footing. Alan froze in shock at the carnage, stammering in disbelief. Deculin swiftly knocked him out, murmuring for him to rest, and ordered Varen to evacuate the other passengers. As Varen carried Ilade to safety, Deculin noted the surprising softness of his assistant's nape, a detail made noticeable by his enhanced senses, though he quickly pushed the thought aside and turned back to face the remaining attackers. He warned the intruders that their deaths would be natural, and as he spoke, a violent surge of mana erupted from his body, instilling a suffocating sense of doom in the assassins. Varen had successfully placed Alan behind cover, observing the floating train with a furrowed brow. Inside the train, the floor was littered with corpses, pools of blood spreading across the space. Exhausted, Deculin slumped against a seat, noting that the simultaneous reduction of explosion damage and combat had drained his mana to just 10 points. Soon, Varen returned to report that all remaining passengers had been evacuated safely, earning Deculin's approval. But then Deculin noticed